I'm so excited to see all of you. I have three young ladies. Let's see, no, two young ladies and one young man who I can't just see him from here. There we go. Yeah. What's your names?
I'm Kaya.
Hi,
I'm
Kaya.
Petra. I'm Gideon.
And Gideon. Oh, that's nice. Those are beautiful names. I'm so glad you could join us tonight. Thank you for joining us. Very good. And who's this at
It's
the
not night
bottom?
here.
Elliot. Hi, how are you?
Fine.
Fine. Oh, that's great. I am so glad to see you. That is wonderful. I'm glad you could join us today too. And today I have a special story. I'm going to tell you a story about a little girl named Tulsi. Have you ever heard that
Hey.
name before? Tulsi?
No.
No?
No.
Bit
No.
different, huh? Tulsi, but it's a pretty name. And Tulsi is a little girl who comes to the school where I am. And I've known her since she was just a very little girl. And today I'm
Baby?
going, no, she wasn't a baby. Let's see. I think she was around 8 years old when she came to work, to school with us, to where we work, to the school. hmm She was about 8 years old. And, Tulsi came to us from a family with a brother, an older brother, and an older sister. And she was the youngest little girl in her family. Are any of you the youngest?
I'm the oldest. My brother is the youngest. He's 3 years old. I'm 6.
Okay. All right. So you're the oldest. Let's see. What about you, Gideon? Are you the
4.
youngest? You're
Yes,
4,
the youngest.
and I think you're the youngest, aren't you?
And Kaya
Wow.
is 12, and Robin is 14, and Fisher is 10.
Okay. All right. Well, Tulsi, she was the youngest little girl. And for a while, her family was very happy. And she had her older sister to talk to, she had her older brother to talk to, and they looked after her very well. But sometimes they got in little tiny fights. You guys don't get in fights, do you?
No.
No, never. I'm sure you're always very nice to each other. But sometimes Tulsi got in little fights with her brother, sometimes with her sister, because she liked to bug them a lot, how little sisters are sometimes. Can you play with me? Oh, can you do this for me? And sometimes her older brother and sister were busy and working and they didn't have time for her, but they loved her very much. And so when they had time, they would play with her, but they were going to school. Well, there was a very sad event, and both of Tulsi's parents died. They weren't there anymore for Tulsi and her brother and her sister. And there was really
Her brother
nowhere
and
for
her sister
Tulsi
died?
to go. Just no, sorry, it was her parents, her mother and father who died, but her brother and sister were still with her, of course. They got very sick. And the father, he died, and then the mother died. And it left Tulsi by herself because her bigger brother and her bigger sister, they went to a school. And Tulsi, because she was so small, she stayed home and they sent her to her aunt's house to live.
Or
Now, her
and
auntie, yeah, her auntie's house to live. Yeah, her mother's sister. And she went to that house to live. And at first, it was nice because Tulsi liked her aunt. Her aunt had been nice to her before. But now her aunt told her she was a burden. And she said, if you're going to live in my house, Tulsi, you're going to have to work very hard because now I have to pay to feed you. And so instead of letting Tulsi go to school with her children, she made Tulsi do all the work in the house. And
Oh,
Tulsi was only 7 years old. She was very young. She was just a little girl. But her auntie was not a very nice person. And she said, you have to work for your food. If you're going to eat in my house, you're going to work for it. And so every day, Tulsi had to get up early. She had to do all the chores. She chopped the vegetables. She carried out the garbage. She even learned to cook. She would bring the fire wood from outside inside so that they could build the fire to cook. It was very sad because Tulsi didn't mind working so much, but her auntie would scold her terribly if she didn't do the job just as she wanted her to do. And that made Tulsi's heart very sad because she was sad already because she didn't have her mommy, and she was sad because she didn't have her daddy. But then her auntie, who had been nice to her before, was not being nice at all, and this hurt her very badly. She was very sad. And sometimes when things went really wrong and she made mistakes in the work, like say she forgot to put the lid on the pot and the bugs got into the water, or she didn't bring in enough wood, her auntie would also spank her very hard. And Tulsi was like, I don't think I deserve this. I tried hard and I made a mistake. She was very sad at this point. But, you know, she already knew Jesus because her mommy and daddy believed in Jesus before. And so she prayed. Now, her older brother came to visit her. And so he didn't know that her auntie, his auntie and her auntie were treating her so badly. And so when he got there and he visited the house and he saw how Tulsi was being treated, it made him also very sad. And he knew one thing for sure. He had to find another place for Tulsi to live. But he couldn't take her because he was a student in a school and he had nowhere to put her. Well, luckily, just a few days later, he ran into a kind man who told him about a school on a mountain in another state, and that if Tulsi wanted to, she could probably attend that school and she could go there and live. The brother was so happy. He was so thankful that he heard about this other school. And so he called there and he asked and he told them about how badly his sister was being treated by the auntie. And he told them that she needed to go to school and she needed a home to live in. Well, they thought about it because they already had a lot of children, but they decided that they would take Tulsi too. They couldn't leave her in that kind of situation, could they? And so they invited her to come and go to school in this beautiful school on top of the mountain. And Tulsi came, and at first she was very scared because, her auntie had really made her feel so bad about herself. And she was afraid of making mistakes. She was afraid that people wouldn't understand her. And she spoke a different language than most of the children. But it wasn't long until she started making friends. And people were kind to her here. When she made a mistake, she wasn't beaten. When she made a mistake, people didn't scream and yell at her. And so she noticed there was a real difference. And she started to make friends. She made friends, and she had the best friends, and they loved to play outside. What they would do is they would make a little place and they would get water and take little tin cans, and they pretended to be making bread, and they pretended to be making food that they could eat. They had so much fun playing in the mud.
Mud?
Yeah, in the mud. Do you ever play in the mud?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah,
There,
sometimes.
one time when I was living in Brazil, there was a hurricane, and I was all I was all playing, and there had a flood by the side of the road, and I was going in the flood, and sometimes I got in my pants all wet and stuff that I had to get
Oh,
home, and
change
my
them.
dad got there and, oh, why are
You're
you all
dirty.
wet? And I said, oh, I stepped in the water and I went too deep. Then he said, okay, change.
Okay, go change, right?
Yeah.
That's right. And sometimes the deans, Miss Christina, she has to say, Tulsi, you need to go change your clothes now, and you're going to have to wash those clothes out. And so she'll have to wash her clothes out nicely because otherwise they'll get stained. But she loves to play like she can cook. And, as she's been growing up, Tulsi is much older now than when she first came to our school. She's around 12 years old now. So she's been at our school for quite a few years. And as she's grown up, she's learned, though, that how to make real bread. So she gets to go in the kitchen and she gets to help make real bread, and she gets to cut real vegetables and help in the kitchen. She learns to sew. Last time I was there, she was taking sewing class, and she was learning to
Oh,
make straight stitches, and she was learning how to cut patterns. Yeah. So now that she's older, she gets to do some really fun things. And those things
yes.
are good for her because that way later she can use them to actually support her family if she needs to. Can any of
So,
you knit? Do you know, can you knit? Because Tulsi's a good knitter. She can make some really beautiful scarves. She learned to knit too.
what is it?
Let's see. You know when you make a scarf and you use two needles and you put them together and you have the yarn and you can pull it and yeah, I'm not really sure how to explain knitting, but you have two needles. Do you guys ever seen that? With two needles and you knit and you make the string and then you take the string and you turn it into a beautiful scarf or a hat
Uh,
or a sweater.
no, my mom, she did it when we were living in Canada. I was
Now
3 years old.
she
She made even an octopus for me.
Wow, so yeah, you remember now.
Or
Yeah, that's
crochet.
right.
Yeah,
So,
crochet.
crocheting, okay, that's also something that you can do. That's right. Crocheting is also a really cool thing to do. But Tulsi knows how to knit, and she knits very well. And so when the children come to live at our school, they get to do these kinds of things. They get to learn to sew, they get to learn to cook and to bake, and she got to learn to knit, and she also learned how to play the flute. Do any of you play a flute? A block flute? It's one of those things, where you hold it and blow. Can any of you play that?
I play a little bit. I learned
Do
a little bit.
you? Oh,
Yeah, she
that's
has those
great.
panic buttons and stuff.
Yeah, for Sabbath school, sometimes I'm sure you can play. And she likes to play for Sabbath school too. So
But
when
I
she's
don't
with
know how to
the
play
little girls,
it.
she does. You don't, but if you practice, my guess is you'll learn really fast because it's a fun instrument to learn and it's not real complicated. So it can be a lot of fun to play, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, Tulsi's very happy now in school. She has friends. And, one of the things that she really appreciates since she's come to school, she's got a new friend who is her best friend, and that's Jesus. Jesus is with her, and she's learned that he loves her and that he'll take care of her no matter what, because she realizes that it was Jesus' providence that brought her to our school, where she can get an education and learn these things and still have really good friends and be safe. So this is my story for tonight about Tulsi.